Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Today I have with me an exciting guest, Steve Shenbaum. He is the founder of Game On Nation, a nationally recognized communication firm that employs game dynamics and improvisation to teach high-performance teamwork, as well as communication, storytelling, public speaking, and presentation skills. And I am really excited about this conversation because Steve, you you kind of sold me at positive humor
Oh,
and
I
how
love
we
that.
use positive humor. I'm like, positive
Yes.
humor is such near and dear to my heart right now. We need humor,
Thank you.
number one.
Yes.
There's so many things that we need that you do. So tell me, first of all, what
Mhm.
is positive humor?
I love that we're starting there versus like, tell me your entire journey, and how did you start this company? Yeah. I love how you're starting that. Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, we have a theory, not theory, just this term that we say, laugh with, not at. I love that. And I didn't love it at first. I thought it was so simple. And uh, that's like, on our t-shirts, it's laugh with, not at, that's our like motto. And it's so simple, but if you really slow down and dissect it, which we totally can, you really start to realize like when you laugh with, you're going to lose some jokes. A lot of laughter and jokes do come from people's expense or they get snarky and you poke fun at. And I'm not saying that there isn't a time and place for that. I'm not. Like if you're with a ton of old friends and you're chopping it up a little bit, it's always fun. But most of the time, we've found with teams and organizations and companies, like really, there's not a lot of room for laughing at. So my theory is if you laugh with, you'll lose some jokes, but you'll gain a ton of trust and you'll gain a ton of authentic relationships.
Yes. Okay. Can you like just set us up with an example of some kind of laughing with instead of laughing at?
Yeah, and I say this in sessions a lot. So like you'll have that moment. Let's use a corporation, so that's a lot of what your audience is the industry. So I want to relate it back to the viewers and the listeners. You're in a corporate setting. Let's say you're not in the corporate space, you're in like a conference, you're at a social event that's also a conference, and there's that potential to elicit laughter in a group of people. And joke, it's not going to be egregious, right? Let's remove that. The egregious jokes are called out right away, or that person, I'm hoping, either corrects themselves or they get the gift of unemployment. But that's a different conversation, right? And that it's people are comfortable, they're joking around, they're slightly a little nervous socially because everyone is. We'll talk about that maybe. And then that person's like, I'm just going to make a joke about Andrea's outfit, or I'm going to try to elicit some dopamine and serotonin amongst the group by mocking you for something you did in a presentation where you wrote the wrong word on the whiteboard. Like, that's it. That's it. And I'm not saying the person that does it, Andrew, is like some horribly ill-hearted human being. Like, save it. No, we're human. But that's what I mean by laugh with, not at. I'm not into like every word has to be perfect. I'm not into if someone says the wrong word, they're
Right.
removed from society. And that's not my jam at all. In fact, I'm pretty passionate about giving people grace. But the idea is, are we getting a joke at someone's expense? And if we are, it may not be worth the laugh.
Hmm. Because what is the expense? What's the cost in general? Not just for
Well,
them, but
yeah,
for me as the
yeah.
or the organization or the team or
Yeah,
such an
that's a
important.
great you said that well, like, at what cost? And again, I wanna be clear, this isn't like you say one thing that's well-intended and all of a sudden you're removed from, the company and society. Let's be realistic. But yeah, what I think the end result too, Andrea, is like, if you and I are working together and I have a tendency to kind of poke fun at you, to get a laugh and it's not egregious, chances are you may not say anything because it's just that idea of like, "Well, I don't wanna make this awkward." And then it becomes really awkward because when you're around me, you haven't canceled me, but you're around me, your guard is up.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
three times I've like poked fun at your alma mater, I've made a joke about like a presentation you gave that didn't go as well as you wanted it to go, whatever. And so what ends up happening is you're just not your authentic self around me. And then all sorts of like trick mirrors come into play, I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
Andrea's quiet." And Andrea, you're like, "No, I'm not quiet at all, Steve. I just don't feel safe when I'm interacting with you."
Yeah, when people have their guard up, it just makes me think that we're a lot more focused on offense and defense instead of and kind of turn toward one another instead of away and looking at the problem that's in front of us, or the
Yeah.
challenge in front of us. Instead of, we're looking at each other and like, do I need to, guard myself from you? And then you lose a lot of energy there.
That's so well said. You lose, let's say you're in a company where there's creativity and brainstorming is really important. You lose talent. Like, let's be real here. You seem like a really like authentic person. I love your sound. I've listened to some of your podcasts. You know, you're going to be less inclined to raise your hand and share in a meeting when you're just like, it's not worth it. Like, I don't want to get hammered here. I don't want the boss to be like, there's Andrea again doing her whatever. And you're just like, I'll play moderate. I'll play simple and I'll play basic, and I'm not going to give my good idea. And then I lose some really cool voices.
Ah, so true.
Mm.
So let's say we don't get a lot out of that negative humor, but
Right.
how do we turn that? How do we actually still, instead of just being guarded all the time about what we're saying, because we don't want that
Yeah.
either. That is not what you're talking about at all. In fact, you guys are all about the play and bringing it on, and I love that so much. So can you tell us more about the positive side of what that looks like, and how people can have that inside of their work and just in general?
Yeah. Good questions. I think part of the solution to that is you have to earn the right to kind of chop it up and go back and forth with one another in a team and in an organization. So there's kind of two questions I heard there. One was just like, what's the positive results? What's the ROI on positive humor? And again, I want to be really clear. Maybe I'm overcomplicating this. Like, it's not about walking into your corporate environment and being like rainbows and unicorns, like, we're going to be positive. Like, don't force it. That's faking. That's faking authenticity, but I think the positive result, one is some of the people on your team that may not have initially been anointed as like the outgoing extroverted dynamics, which I have issues with those words too, like extroverted, introverted. I'm like, I'm an ambivert. There's times where I'm really introverted because I'm just not feeling it. And there's times where I'm outgoing when, I am feeling it. So you'll find some of the folks that are a little quieter, that process a little bit on the move versus on the fly. You'll start to see that they have really good senses of humor. You'll actually open up and make humor inclusive. Because if the humor in the corporation is always the quick witty, always the one on the fly, always the quick, sharp response, it actually limits that style of humor to a very, very specific personality. And then usually the loudest, quickest, fastest in the room is getting the quote unquote laugh. And when you enter this process in a way where you're like, listen, humor is like available to a lot of us. You actually see like the analyst funny and the coder has a really good sense of humor, and all these stereotypical like giftings that may not align with theatrical. All of a sudden you're like, you're hilarious. So
I know some of those people.
Yeah. It's wonderful. I was you have an outgoing personality. I was a theater major. So I was always given the mic. Be funny. Well, you'd be amazed at the beauty and humor in the auditor at Deloitte. It's there. They just need to feel safe and comfortable chopping it up. And once they do, you're like, oh my goodness, you're really creative. You're really funny. And you're a huge asset to this company now because you're actually sharing really, really good ideas.
Okay. So how do we bring this playfulness, positivity to that environment then? Like, I'm a leader. I'm a leader in my company, in my organization.
Yep.
And I know my team is they're kind of flat right now.
Yeah.
Like we've got a lot to do. We're stretched too thin, starting to feel some burnout. What do I do to infuse us with a little bit of that playfulness and positive humor that you're talking about?
That's so good. I think part of it is you have to invite it in a realistic way. So you have to kind of define like so let's be really raw and transparent here. Words like play and playful, we all know can be deemed really soft and actually kind of a detriment to the ROI. They can. Like in the corporate space, the military space, the elite sports space, you come in and you're like, let's be playful. Like you got to be careful because people be like, we don't have time for playful. We got to $4 billion company and we got to hit our numbers and we're being reviewed on the quarterly. And I actually value and appreciate that. So to your question as leaders, how do we invite it in? Well, first you have to define what we mean. Because if you say to a team, hey, let's be playful, you'll have 10 different interpretations.
Yeah.
Playful could be, are we going to go out and play hide and seek right now? Or are we doing like capture the flag? Or are we being like creative with our graphic design? So as a leader, I think before you even invite that, and when you invite someone to a party, if you're the leader of that party, it's clear what time the invitation is going to be sent out, what time the party starts, what's the theme of the party, who's bringing what. Leaders have to think that same way. I want everyone to be in a playful mindset and then model it, define it. What do I mean? And then when you define it, I think it needs to be realistic and it needs to be slightly grounded. For example, team, we need to be more playful. And what I mean by that, I'm just using an example. Let's say you and I were running a company that does like accounting, and I'm not mocking that, but like not a traditional, like wildly creative space. And what I mean by playfulness is on Friday, let's just have a team lunch where we share some values and things that excite us that have nothing to do with work, that are not too intimate. And that's what I mean by playfulness is we call them coins in Game On. Let's have a lunch. We're going to share some coins, things that light us up, that bring us some joy, that have nothing to do with what we do for a living. And you'll hear things like, I'm a Cornhusker fan because I know you're from Nebraska, I'm guessing, but I hope I'm not wrong. Or I love to travel, or my father served in the military. These are not all mine, but ones that I hear. And you know what happens, Andrea, is by doing that exercise, laughter gets created because people, and as a former comedian in Hollywood, people don't understand laughter is not always, did you hear the funny joke? Laughter could be me saying Cornhuskers. If that, is that one of your coins? I
Sure.
totally
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I said, hey, Cornhuskers, and we start talking about Big Ten football or whatever it may be, or
Volleyball.
family volleyball, there, oh my gosh, they had like 105,000 people. But see what we're doing right now?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying to you, hey, Andrew, I got a funny joke that I read on the internet. That's weird. That's so weird. It's so weird. I don't want to hear it. But if I said, Andrea, like, what was that like for you? Or were you, actually, I will ask, like, because that blew my mind. Like, were you there you went?
No, I wasn't there. My dad and my sister were there though. And so I remember, like, I talked to my dad when he was on his way home. He was just on cloud nine. He was just amazing. Like, that was amazing. I just cannot believe how amazing it was. Yeah, he went on and on.
So really cool. I have a really funny story about that. I went to Northwestern, so we're not in the same like sports, like we just don't have the same like the alumni base. But I was in Barcelona for this workshop with PepsiCo, and the leader in PepsiCo is a really wonderful guy, Anthony, and he's from Italy. And on the drive back to the airport, he's like, "Hey, Steve, I have to ask you, like, why is volleyball such a big thing in the United States, like with college volleyball?" And I said, Anthony, I don't know what you're talking. Did you watch the Nebraska game? He goes, yeah, I read that article yesterday. So he thought that like all the Big Ten volleyball teams play in these football arenas. And I had to explain to him, that was like a one-time thing that Nebraska pulled off because Cornhuskers. But anyway, it was really fun. And we ended up having a really neat discussion on like just sports in general and like, how did they pull that off? I'm like, they have a huge fan base and they decided we're going to break the record for volleyball attendance.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And that's what happened. And just context for anybody that's listening that doesn't know. Mm-hmm. The Nebraska, University of Nebraska put on this big, huge thing to have a game in the football stadium. And so they filled it with 92,000 people. And broke a record. So
I thought it was rad.
August of 2023. Yeah, it was so cool. But you're right. Yeah. So like having these conversations that are a little less transactional. You know, that's one of the things that we're talking about with people a lot is we're getting a lot of this, like when we're on Zoom, everything is so transactional.
Yeah.
Because if we're remote, we're just, and people are trying to find a way. I don't know if they're even trying to find a way, but I know that they need it, which is to just be human.
Yeah.
And in these environments, whether it's a virtual environment or an in-person environment where it just doesn't feel like, where people feel a little overwhelmed and stressed out.
Agree. But I think what just happened right there was neat. And your listeners need to know, it's not like we go back years. We're meeting, right now, Andrea, I know your work from your podcast. But like what we just did right there, I think is actually very reasonable. We talked a little bit about coins. You smiled when I said Cornhuskers. We ended up having a nice conversation that wasn't like life-changing about volleyball, the record-breaking attendance at the stadium. What I mean by sharing that is going back to that question I loved you asked is how do leaders infuse playfulness, laughter, and humor in the workplace? Well, one thing I would tell you not to do is don't try to force it. And I'll give an example, and I'm not trying to be snarky, but like in this space that you just talked about where folks are struggling and we're looking for transformation, not just transaction. I don't think the answer is let's get together for 2 hours on Zoom and do like a happy hour. Like that's where we ended. We go to extremes.
Yeah.
Or let's get the company together. You know what we're going to do? We're going to shock everyone and come in funny outfits, and we're going to spend all day running. I'm just making this up. That's actually not what people are starving for. It actually feels forced. It feels forced. And honestly, I don't maybe want to dress up in a costume. So I would say to every leader, don't complicate humor. Do not complicate playfulness. Playfulness is actually wildly simple. The most played game in the history of civilization is hide and seek. It is the most, I'm not saying play hide and seek with your staff. I'm saying think about that for a second. Everybody played hide and seek. One person hid, the other looked for them. That's it. Now, don't literally do that with your company because we're adulting now and there's other dynamics. However, what could we do in a simple way that adds levity and humor? And I'm being really basic right now, and your audience is not going to go wild. Are we making sure that everyone's birthday is honored? Are we making sure that like when someone comes up with an anniversary in the workplace, that there's something fun? And if you know their coins, you can actually add that to their like gift. Are we giving people time back on a meeting? Are we starting our meetings on Zoom with like 4 minutes? I'm not talking 24 minutes of a little bit of levity. Like, hey, highlight from the weekend, go. Highlight from the weekend, go. You're not invading people's privacy. You're not trying to read their feelings journal. And that's it. And I think if we did that, leaders would realize playfulness and humor is not so exclusive to like the wild, party planner. So,
yeah. So, Steve, you mentioned that you were an actor in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Can you tell us just a little bit about that? Like,
thank you.
Okay, so let's go back now. Now that we've kind of covered a little bit of the what we're talking about, I want to take a little caveat here and just share with us about like where did this call come from? Why do you care about this? And why is this
That's
your
good. I love how
area
you
of
said
expertise?
That. Yeah, why do I care about it? Yeah, I appreciate that because that does connect back to a little bit of I won't go into like a long story, but yes, I was an actor. I was a theater major at Northwestern. I grew up in LA, moved back, went to did theater in Chicago, moved back to LA and was a working commercial sitcom film actor. When I say working, not to brag, I want people to understand like I was working and I still wasn't happy. But one of the things that I found when I was auditioning, I was a very good auditioner, by the way. I'm not being arrogant. I wasn't a great actor. My college friends knew that they were way more into it than I was, but I worked a lot. I have a unique look. I loved auditioning for some reason. And I was able to use that 3-minute time slot to be present, which is hard to do. But what I found in that process, one we've already talked about, I realized the power of humor during that journey because I was a character actor. So I realized how powerful humor was and how it can move people and elicit people and create dopamine and also shame people. Like I saw all the beauty and dangers of humor during that journey. And then that really motivated me to some degree to use that in my curriculum. But what's more important was I found that as an actor, I realized that people that weren't in the acting space remove themselves from the painting of presentation. And what I mean by that is many people didn't feel like they were a presenter. So it was exclusive to like the performers, the actors, like we're the performers, give us the mic. We're going to present. And even when we went into the corporate space, it was always like, oh, Andrea and Steve are going to talk because that's what they do. And actually that bothered me. This is years ago. So this was my first entry into like exclusion versus inclusion. And there's many ways to chop that up. So my bigger driving point was as an actor, I realized that many of my non-actor friends immediately labeled themselves as introverts or not dynamic because I think society sometimes hands the microphone to the most charismatic person in the room or the loudest person in the room. So I got really motivated to teach athletes and non-actors how to tell their story and prove their value and stop calling themselves boring or introverted. So that really became my driving force. And then laugh with became part of the curriculum. But yeah, a bigger thing was just helping people like Pete Sampras, who was a tennis player at the time, number one for 6 years in a row. For those younger folk, they may not know him, but he was a wonderful tennis player, but very quiet. So I started working with athletes who had really built this muscle of athleticism, but may not have had the encouragement to tell the story well. And I got into helping them find that story and then realizing they have a voice. So,
and the story that you wanted them to be able to tell, or they wanted to be able to tell.
Yeah, you know what's really funny was like it's this statement that just resonates was, "Tell me about yourself." Like I said to Pete, "What's your biggest fear?" This is a guy who's won 6 years in a row, number one. Like things that we couldn't do, like you watch and I get nervous and I'm like, how is he calm? How is he calm? Like down 2 sets, right? Like with point break and and no problem. His biggest fear was after the match being asked, "So how did you feel? Tell me about yourself." So when you've got like NASCAR drivers, football players, volleyball players doing the most amazing elite things in front of huge audiences, and then when they come off the court, they come off the field, they come off the track, and the question that they're most fearful of is, "Hey, tell me about yourself." That was not a fear of mine. Like, tell me about yourself. I almost wanted that as a recovering narcissist. Like you want people to ask you that, right? So that blew my mind. And then you start to realize there's 3 of people's biggest fears are public speaking, death, and taxes. I don't think one of those should be on that list, Anyway, so tell me about yourself was the question that I wanted them to answer. It's not even a question, it's a statement. Yeah, and that's what I was hoping to help them with.
So do you have any thoughts about how normal people who don't normally get handed the mic, and maybe just a couple ideas about them for them to be able to have something to talk about when they do have the opportunity?
Yeah. By the way, I mean this. I've said this like you ask really, really good questions. I love this.
Thank you.
No, because you're forced to get to like, so what's a practical technique? Like, what is it? I'll tell you what it's not. Just believe in yourself. You can do it. Like, save it. First thing I think we all need to realistically understand is that, and it's going to sound a little cliche, we are all presenters. But I want to caveat that. And I want everyone who's listening, who's not the person that's been handed the mic, wasn't the person in the youth camp who was like, get up on stage, right? It doesn't mean we're all presenters in what you do, Andrea, like leading podcasts on the daily. It may not be you speaking in front of an arena, but every interaction that we have, whether it's at the grocery store, volunteering for our child's volleyball team, having a meeting in a company where your 3 people report to you, you are giving a presentation, And I want people to understand that first and foremost, because if we immediately think presentation is the TED Talk, presentation is the rabbi, the pastor, the faith leader in a huge church, you've completely isolated yourself from that arena. And that's actually a statistical anomaly. Very few people are speaking in an arena. We are all interacting in social events, at barbecues, at tailgates, in small business meetings. And then what do you do? Well, I will try to give one technique. We call it objectives, and we tell every presenter, now that we define what presentation means, so people put themselves in the picture versus like, oh, I have a friend who's a public speaker. No, that's not the only presenter. We say, pick one positive word that you want to make your audience feel. One positive word you want to make. It's not a manipulation game. So for instance, in this conversation, I don't know you very well, Andrea. I'm enjoying our interaction. I love your questions. My objective is to make you feel comfortable. I'm not trying to trick you. And I want your audience to feel informed. Those are 2 objectives I'm playing. One is to make you feel comfortable. I want to honor you. I don't want to interrupt too much because I do have a lot I want to say. I want to share the space. And then for your audience or your listeners, I want them to feel informed, which means I have to also get to my point. And those objectives are something that everyone can use. So listeners, if you're nervous, you will be. Don't worry about your sweaty hands. Worry about the other person's sweaty hands. And think about how do you want to make that person or group of people feel? And the word better be positive because negative objectives work. If you want to make someone feel inferior, guess what? Congratulations.
And you've chosen the easy route.
100%. Thank you. You did. And then we wonder why, oh, there's trust issues and there's respect issues and that person's quiet. No, they're not. You made them feel inferior. You did it purposefully. And now the person doesn't really want to raise their hand, which goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is laughing with. And then we're not getting the creativity that we desire because no one's like comfortable to go, I have an idea. Because the last time that it happened, they got totally jammed out, right? They got totally crushed. So that would be a technique. We call it objectives. And that's one of the examples of our exercises we use is we love playfulness. We love interactivity. But you know what? It can't end there or else it just becomes a performance. And honestly, I'll tell companies, no offense, we're not that good. Go watch the Florida Studio Theater. Go to an improv show. Those are wonderful. Go to Second City. We're not there to entertain. So the improv and the playfulness actually is a gateway to then get to where you got me to, which is, all right, now make it make sense. What's a practical technique that we all can run? So I hope your listeners grab that one, which is before you present in your meeting, it's a corporate meeting, 10 people. How do you want to make the group of 10 feel in this meeting? Do you want to make them feel intrigued? Do you want to make them feel included? If you want to make them feel included, you may ask a couple of questions. So,
yeah, absolutely. I love how you are framing that in terms of what you want the other person to feel, because it is way more common for us to just, again, be in that transactional mode. I'm overwhelmed. I might care about people, but really I'm only focused on what I feel like I need to do and what I need to get done or what we need to get done, not on engaging the listener, engaging the other people in the room, not just the listener, but like engaging them in conversation to be able to get to the goals that we need to get to. So I really appreciate that others' perspective.
thank you. And thanks for getting me to that sort of practicality, which I think all of us as leaders need to think about is make it make sense. And I'll be very, very transparent here. As I share with you, I get excited. Like you ask really good questions. I've had my cup of coffee. I'm standing up. I feel pretty good. And then I actually had to practice objectives in the midst of this conversation because I had to remind myself, Andrea's audience, listeners, am I making them feel informed? So Steve, slow down a little bit. You're not here just to put on a performance. It's not about you. Make things practical, land the plane. So it's not like I've graduated. I use these techniques all the time. And I want to say this is very important, imperfectly, people. It's the other thing I want to share with presenters, which is everyone, stop with this perfection. Stop with this. And public speakers, I'm speaking to us now. Stop with this, bring it. Ooh, that was awesome. That speaker was spitting fire. Those were some nuggets. Like, stop it. That's insane. It's not fair. And normal theater people in Broadway do not go up to each other before a play and go, bring it, spit fire, melt the audience's faces. They don't talk like that. You say, serve, enjoy the show, serve the audience. Let's trust the process. And I think as presenters, sometimes with the elite presenters, this language, I know I'm kind of going off a little bit. It's bizarre. I don't know. Have you heard that, Andrea? Have you heard like, man, that speaker was like on fire. Like, we're not dragons. We're not wizards.
Right. I think we can get conflated, the person who's up in front, but then also I've noticed that it also can turn the audience into skeptics and like judging whether or not you've been fired. Like they're, instead of thinking about what the information you provided and whether or not that's helpful to them and what they can do with it, it turns into, yeah, they did a good job. Or no, I wish they would, I didn't really think they did that great of a job. Like, what?
So
Why are we talking about how good of a job this person did? The question is, how practical is it? And what are you going to be able to do with it? What's changed?
Andrew, you're really good. Because we've gone, and I've done it, because we go from what we should be, which is presenting practical information. And you can go on sharing the stage, facilitating, to performing. And when we perform, you said it beautifully, the result is the audience is going to judge the performance.
Yeah.
But if the company is hiring Game On or Andrea or anyone out there, unless you're hiring a stand-up comic, which is a completely different industry, or hiring a hypnotist or hiring someone to just a band, that's a performance. But why as keynote speakers, public speakers, should we, and you've actually elicited a really, I never thought of it that way. It actually affects the audience. The audience starts thinking that that was funny. That's not what we're there to do unless you're hired as a stand-up. You're there to share practical, tangible techniques so this company, this team, this group could improve. Yeah, you've nailed it. So I'm trying to get out. It's hard. It's hard. I will say this, the more practical my team and I are, I wouldn't say our surveys are low, but you definitely can get fives on a scale of 1 to 5 if you're just funny and performative. You'll get fives. You will get a few fours if you actually get more practical and tangible, because you're actually sharing a grounded message that may challenge people to think a little differently and adjust their behaviors, right? I call it like when you become the fun sponge and you're like, hey, everyone, we need to get 8 hours of sleep. And if you can't get 8, try to get 7. And you can't get 7, try to get 6. Like that is not going to go viral. That's not a standing ovation jam, but it's actually insanely practical, right? Hey, everyone, let's try to end our hour-long Zooms at 55 minutes. And if we do that 3 times, we've found ourselves 15 minutes of daylight. Like that is so ridiculously simple and practical that people are almost like, be funny. Where's Steve funny? And I'm like, actually, I'm really into practicality right now because if we don't get sleep, nothing's funny.
Okay. Why the phrase game on for the name of your company? Because I really like it, but I would love to hear why, not just why you came up with it, but like, what does it mean?
Yeah, I could answer the first part. The second part is like still in process. So it came out when I was in London. So I actually just told this story to my wife because we were back in London. I was visiting, and I'm going to drop a name, a dear friend of mine, Kimberly Williams Paisley. She's Brad Paisley's wife and also a dear, dear friend of mine. And she was doing a movie in London, and I visited her years ago. And I had a day, a break where she was doing her filming, and I was exploring Buckingham Palace. And I heard, and I was thinking about Game On. I was thinking about the concept, but I didn't know the name. I was thinking about this idea of teaching athletes, corporations, military, but really at the time athletes, how to share their story, prove their value, and just be good storytellers. And I heard a group of young soccer players outside of the grass of Buckingham Palace. And before they started the game, one of them said in a British accent, "Game on." And I remember hearing it while I was thinking about this thing. And that's where it came. That was it. I thought that was a really cool term to start something, to initiate and to invite. So now you're forcing me in a great way to ask, like, what does it really mean? I've never really been asked that. I haven't. I've been asked like how the name came up. Like, yeah, it sort of had this playfulness, but it also had this sense of let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let game on. Like the game is on. Like, it's not like we're going to talk about and brainstorm about. It's not called like almost game on or like possibly game on, right? It's like game on. Let's go. And I also like the term game. I found it to be playful, but also there's a high performance competitive side to it. And yeah, that would be kind of where and that was like 27 years ago, which is like,
that's awesome.
Bizarre. Thanks for asking that. Yeah. London, Buckingham Palace.
That's so fun. What a fun story. So game dynamics. You mentioned game dynamics in your bio and other places. I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit more about what game dynamics are.
Yeah. And I'm into like giving credit where credit's due. So this actually is my colleague, Blair Bloomston, who's been with me 19 years. And also our other colleague, Chris Friday. Chris joined us about 12 years ago. We were all at IMG Sports Academy in Bradenton, Florida. So that's a whole other story. But I moved Game On from LA to IMG Academy when they found out I was doing work with Pete Sampras. And we were asked to sort of build this leadership character development program at IMG Academy, which was a blessing. We did that for 12 years. So in that journey from 2003 to 2012, Blair started as an intern and then immediately moved up to and now she's just an elite member of our team. But she came to us actually in the midst of it and said, you know what, the improv exercises are really resonating, but we didn't really know why. So she was a gamer. She played a lot of sim, Second Life stuff, not my jam, but hers. And it was great. And she goes, Steve, there's some science behind this. Like there's a science behind why. So I kind of did it without the knowledge that there was a science of gamification, game dynamics. So it started with Blair, and then Blair started to explore why do video games work for people to stay on them? Why is there so much sort of attention on for my age, it would be like Candy Crush and Farmville, right? And for those maybe younger, I'm not mocking Pokemon and so we started studying it. And we realized there's game dynamics in our improv. And the four that we found out, and then I created an acronym, but that's secondary. The four that we came up with were there was mystery in our exercises, which there's in video games. There's incentive. There needs to be some kind of incentive. It doesn't mean like a badge, but there needs to be something we're going towards. There's laughter. There's laughter in our curriculum, joy, and then there's empowerment. So we actually decided to come up with like 12 game dynamics. I picked 4 because it spelled out mile.
Nice.
Thank you. I wanted to
find a way to spell a word.
Yeah, spell a word. So I get the credit for the acronym, but Blair and Chris really drove it and said, hey, we need to explore why so many people are playing Pac-Man and Frogger and World of Warcraft and SimCity and all these things. And they all have common. They're all common. And that is there's an element of intrigue. There's an element of time. There's an element of urgency. There's an element of visual. And there's a lot of game dynamics. So for those listening that aren't game dynamic people, I wasn't. All of these motivating factors that get us to like watch 3 Netflix documentaries when we only were planning on watching 1 episode, right? Those are all powerful. So my theory is let's use them for good. If they can get me to scroll Facebook when my daughter would rather play soccer with me, and irrationally I'm scrolling to hear about a high school friend and what yogurt they had for breakfast. No offense to yogurt or friend or breakfast. That doesn't make sense. So I wanted to know what it is that drives us to chase Pokemons that don't exist, to play video games endlessly, to stay on Facebook while your daughter wants you to play outside. And then I decided, let's explore that and let's use it for good. And that's what we're trying to do imperfectly.
Very cool.
Thanks.
What else do you want to tell us about what your company does and how people can find you?
I appreciate that. Well, I'm not great at the sell on the stage, but my team's trying to get me to do better. So we do specifically focusing right now on teamwork and communication. And what I mean by teamwork would be how companies, military, and sports teams can create a little bit more authentic connection through our exercises and our practical good to do's. So that's one area of our business, corporate, military, college and pro sports teams, teamwork, but not teamwork in like motivational inspiration, in here practical techniques that we can use to not force intimacy, but actually get to know one another. Things like coins, things like objectives. That's one side of our business. The other side of our business is what we talked about a lot, which I really appreciate, Andrea, which is public speaking presentation skills. Again, same audience, corporate, military. We do a lot of work in the military and college pro sports. The idea being, can we improve our presentation? Can we improve our public speaking? Can we improve the way we handle meetings? That audience would be more like sales teams, executives, emerging leaders, anyone who's conveying information. It could be folks that go out on the road and have to share the value proposition of their company to their clients. We have nothing we're selling right now. Our big focus over the next few months is just to add value. So one thing I do encourage is we have a website where you can subscribe to our newsletter and our resources and our blog. And that's it right now. Now, eventually we want to do some more like live trainings. We're going to do some pre-recordeds. But right now, my theory with the team is, hey, our marketing plan is add value, add value, add value. Let's earn the trust. So if there's listeners there, it's gameonnation.com. And on that site, you can see at the front page where you can subscribe to our weekly blog, to our content, and to some of our public speaking, presentation, and teamwork resources that we want to provide to you. And yes, down the road, you will maybe get an offer that says, hey, we'd love for you to sign up for our pre-recorded training, or we have a live event, or here's a hat. But right now, my theory is let's earn the right to ask for that offer.
All right. Well, we'll definitely link to all that in the show notes too, to make sure that people have an easy access to it too. Yeah, I just want to thank you again for the work that you're doing, and then also for sharing that here, because even personally and professionally, I have been thinking a lot about how important it is for me to be more playful. And I think it's so easy for anybody to get into the rut where we get overwhelmed or just get into that get her done mode, whether that be in our families or at work. And but both need our playfulness too. They need our heart. They need our connection, authentic connection that you're talking about. And I just am excited about what you guys are up to.
That means a lot, Andrea. I know we maybe on the tail end of landing the plane, but same moment that we had with like the Nebraska stadium volleyball. I do have to ask you, you have a wooden giraffe behind you. Tell me about that. And I know a lot of your listeners are not viewers. They will say, because I had that exact giraffe. Where did that come from?
Well, the giraffe's actual origin is not all that exciting, but the reason why I got the giraffe
Yeah,
is because our family is going to Kenya in January.
it's awesome.
And so it's a bit of a like visionary, like
I love it.
reminding me of what we're going to be doing. And yeah, so that's the reason why I got the giraffe. Thanks for asking.
100%. Well, and my origin story on mine was even less impactful. I was shopping at Rooms to Go 20 years ago, and they had that giraffe on the floor. And I thought it was for sale, like all the other stuff. And I was like, I'd like to also purchase this giraffe. And the supervisor said, it's not for sale. And I said, can we make it for sale? And we ended up negotiating. And my nieces who would visit me in Florida, and they called that giraffe Joffrey. So I haven't seen that type of wooden giraffe since I had Joffrey. So
Wow.
kudos to you.
Why did you want to buy it so bad?
It was so cool. I had this image of when people show up to this is when before I met my wife, I just had this image. I felt like it belonged in my house. I can't explain it any other way. I just thought this wooden giraffe would be so cool when you entered the house. You'd be right there. I mean, I guess why not? Well, all jokes aside, it goes back to like, I found some playfulness in it. And you know what's funny? It was a conversation starter when people came in like, what's going on with the giraffe? I'm like, oh, that's Joffrey. That's Joe. So yeah.
All right.
I'm glad you answered.
One last question for you.
Yes.
So people that listen to this podcast, they know that it's about having a voice of influence, and influences we see as mutual, we see as important in life for each person to feel as well. What last piece of advice would you give to somebody who would like to have a voice of influence?
Not to be so loud, but try to be sound. The loud is really noticeable. The loud person, and I say this as being a former loud person, don't answer the loud by silence. Answer the loud by being sound. And when we're sound, I think more people will put themselves in the painting of presenter, public speaker, voice sharer. I think our journey should be sound. Now, sounds appeal differently to different people. You know, music, some people love this type of music, some people love this type of music. But I would encourage all of us, including me, you do a great job of this, Andrea, is just try to be sound in the music and words you read, the things you listen to, the people you take in. And when you're sound, then I feel like we can be less emotionally out of control. We could be less critical of ourselves and others. We can be less sharp and hot takey. We can be less cancelly, and we could be more gracious, more inclusive, and more human. And all of it in a really imperfect way. Because guess what? We're imperfect.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. Appreciate
You're
you
welcome.
being here today.
I appreciate you, Andrew. You have an awesome sound. You have an awesome heart. So I'm really glad I was your guest.